Okay, here we go with another question and answer. I'm going to tell you the question and give my answer. um, so this question, basically, to sum up, does being transgender affect your sexual identity as far as being a lesbian or slash straight, or is trans its own sexuality? Another really great question. I get this question a lot. So, identifying as a lesbian or as heterosexual or as gay, that is a sexual orientation or a sexual preference. Identifying as transgender is a gender identity. So two completely different things, but a lot of people often mistake them as being kind of all in the same group. And I think some of that comes from the LGBT acronym. But anywho, so yeah, sexual preference and gender identity, being transgendered, are two different things. Now, being transgender, for some people, for some trans people, it does affect their sexual orientation, because, for instance, if a person that identified as a lesbian their whole life comes out as transgender and subsequently identifies as a male, they will, just as an example, they will then, of course, identify as heterosexual because their attraction is for women only. Now, that's just an example. That's not everybody. All trans people are like snowflakes. We're all wonderfully different and diverse. So for me, because I can only speak for myself, from my personal experience, I identified as a lesbian for 28 years. I came out as transgender, and I subsequently identify as queer because while I am attracted to women, I, I don't feel heterosexual. That doesn't fit for me. It's not that I don't like heterosexual people. I do. I love them. Not in that way. But that's just not a label that I feel comfortable wearing. I identify as queer. I am, well, I mean, obviously I'm attracted to Shay because that's who I'm in a relationship with. But just for the sake of discussion, I am predominantly attracted to women. I'm not going to say that I would never, God forbid, Shay and I ever split up. I'm not going to say I would never be with a man. Just because, I'm older, I've lived more life, and I can get on board with love shouldn't know gender. It should just be about the person. I mean, it would have to be a real special man for me to do that, just because that's not something that I've really done or have a lot of experience with, so it would be kind of bizarre. Like, it kind of makes me feel weird talking about it, but I think that's because I'm in a relationship. So, there are some trans men that do come out as trans and transition and will go from identifying as a lesbian to being attracted to both women and men, or some of them even just change to being attracted only to men. And the same goes for trans women. And again, how they choose to identify is up to them. But, a trans man that's attracted to men has every right to identify as gay, because he's a man attracted to other men. Some gay guys find that offensive and incomprehensible. But you have to really get around the fact that gender is defined by what's below your belt line, because it's not. Trans people cannot afford to think that way, because there are some things that unfortunately we can't change. So it's not in our best interest to believe that gender is defined by what's below your belt. And if you can kind of open your mind and really stop and think about it, gender is not defined by that. It's defined by what's between your ears. And, a trans woman who is attracted to other women has every right to say that she's a lesbian, whether or not she is post-op or pre-op, because that's a big issue in the lesbian community. Again, you really have to open your mind and think beyond the paradigms that have been force-fed to you for your entire life. So, for me personally, coming out as trans didn't affect my sexuality. I can't speak for other trans people that come out and have a change in their sexuality, but I do have a theory, and my theory is that, like, okay, just the fact that I can say that I would consider being with a man if Shay and I split up, it's because I'm actually comfortable with my body now. I'm comfortable with my identity. I'm comfortable with how I move through this world and how I physically interact with other people. And because of that, I feel a lot more comfortable to express an openness in my sexuality. You know, before I came out and began my medical transition, I would not have felt comfortable interacting with another male in my female body. That was not okay. That's not something I was comfortable with. But now, and again, Shay is not insecure at all. I don't know why I keep saying this, but God forbid if Shay and I ever split up, I would feel much more comfortable approaching another male in my male body. So that's my theory. I don't think that sexualities really experience this sudden, shocking change. I theorize that trans people are finally comfortable with their body and they're comfortable with interacting with whatever gender in that body that they have given themselves, that they have worked for, that they've attained through transition. So, yeah. And again, just personal theories. I'm not speaking for everyone else, and I know I keep saying that, but a lot of trans people get very easily offended if they even for a second think that you're trying to speak for them. I don't like when people use blanket statements and speak for any segment of the community or any minority as a whole, because we can only speak for ourselves. Anywho, just a little disclaimer. Again, really great question, and I'm going to move on to the next one because my mouth is getting tired.